Hi, I'm Penny Owen, and this is
Bill Cecil.
And we're welcoming you back to Successful Kids, Successful Schools. So the last time we talked, there were two ideas that I wanted to get across. One was my little Pac-Man, the Bloom's taxonomy, right? And the other thing I talked about was Homo Ludens by Johann Huizinga about playing man, right? Two big concepts that were eureka moments for me. And I want to stress this really quickly. On this side, okay, I'm showing you the application one because basically my game was all about apply it, apply it, apply it. Let's get to the higher order thinking skills as quickly as possible because the lower level just comes with it. You got to have the lower level to have the higher level. But the other thing that's interesting here is it's called verbs, active verbs. So I'm going to stress this. Every one of my little Pac-Men, whether it's analysis, even when it's knowledge, even when it's the knowledge base, it's active verbs. So the concept they're trying to get through to us is experiential learning. Kids have to be active to learn. You want them to learn with their whole beings. You want them to learn not just intellectually, but physically and emotionally and even spiritually. You want them engaged totally with their action, right? Those are active verbs. And we've neglected that. We sit them down, we put them in front of a smartboard, and we want them to just sit there and somehow think that it's really fun to learn. And they constantly are saying, I'm bored. Well, yeah, they're bored because they're not active, right? Active verbs.
I got to tell you, I've never heard it put that way, and that's brilliant because that's exactly what it is. It's learning. It should be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And how many times are they not doing? You know, I don't know if I told this story. So they have silent reading, and they put on the smartboard. They put the clock up. 15 minutes. You're not supposed to. You're just supposed to read a book. Right. And I'll look over at them, and they're all like, right. You know, or they're watching the clock. Like, okay, it's time's going, but they're not reading.
Right.
Like, they're not active. They have taken all sorts of things away from us. It's sort of like WALL-E, the movie. You know, the computer's going to do all the movement and do all the action, and we're going to become, you know, lazy slugs that sit on lounge chairs. Okay, so what makes them incredibly active is games. Games. So I'm going to take 2 seconds about this. Well, I'm not. I'm going to take more than that. But so I'm watching I'm watching the Pistons play the Cavs, right? And as a fan of them, they're my two favorite teams. So I'm like, I don't care which one wins,
lose.
except I do because now I live in Ohio. So I'm like, come on, Cavs. I'm like, and then I go, come on, Pistons, come on, right? Whatever. Right. I'm like so engaged in a game, and you know, and I'm almost 80, and it still works for me. It gets me involved. And the reason I'm telling you this is because in the fourth grade, we spend the entire year. Like most of my programs are geared for like a half a year, right? But in fourth grade, it's an entire year. It's completely competitive. It's a game that goes from the classroom to the school and to all of the fourth grades in the district are competing with one another. So I've created this like, you know, NBA setup in the fourth grade. And I now really, really, really am going to bring in the idea of boys and how boys learn. And I'm going to tell a very quick story for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Because when I first started working at Bill's school, I worked with a 5th grade class. It wasn't Bill's 5th grade class. I mean, I did this thing about doing what we called storyteller project in all the classes before I found the ones that I was going to use as my research. And there was this one class. It had an even number of girls and boys, 11 girls, 11 boys, right? And 11 of them were on Ritalin. 11 of them. You want to guess how many that were on Ritalin were boys? 10. There was one boy that was not on Ritalin, prescribed. Why? Because they moved too much. They were too fidgety, and you give them this drug, and they kind of zone, right? Like, okay, and they're boring. All those 10 boys and one girl.
There's a book I read not too long ago by a New York Times, best-selling author, and it was called Stolen Focus, and it talked about that exactly, how boys have a much higher rate of being put on Ritalin than girls, and so you nailed it. I mean,
right,
that's exactly it.
And I saw that, in the 1990s, right? And I'm sitting going, wait, if there are 10 boys on Ritalin and one girl on Ritalin, are we not concerned that there's something we are doing wrong about the way we're educating boys, right?
Right.
I mean, it can't be that there are that percentage of boys that need to be drugged, and they also, once they get on it, they keep them on it now until they graduate from high school. Like, really? That many years of being zoned out? And you're not looking at it and thinking, might there be something wrong with the way we're teaching boys? And the answer is yes, there is. And the answer is that this many years later, 20 years, there's this guy named Scott Galloway who wrote this book called Notes on Being a Man. Because people are now saying, we feel ignored. And I'm saying to them, yeah, no kidding, really? And it's mostly men, young men, that say, I'm being ignored. Yes, you are. We aren't thinking about you, who you are, and what needs you need to learn. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill, because Bill also when I was in school, there were no male teachers in elementary school. No male teachers at all. By the time I got into 6th grade, I had one male teacher who I absolutely adored, Mr. Knopfsinger. And I'm like, oh my God, no, 7th grade, sorry. And I was like, I've never experienced a man in the classroom. And Bill came into that as a man in elementary teaching. So I want you to take over a little bit about your experience being a man in the classroom and the experience of dealing with boys.
Sure. So for me, it's interesting because I was a student that was considered, they never labeled me. I never got, because back then I don't think we did that. We didn't label kids when we were in school, when I was a student, a young student. But I was a kid that would be sitting in my seat, couldn't sit still because I was bored, and I would just, start finding things to, like I said, I wasn't doing it trying to be mean. I was doing it because, or trying to, because I don't like school or didn't like the teacher. It was because I couldn't sit still. And it was just sitting there and sit and get. And so that's how I did it. And so, but what's interesting is that I heard more about this just from us talking about this, and it made me think about that, is that when I was teaching, I was teaching from a boy's perspective,
right.
So I never saw that problem in my classroom, because if there is that problem, because I never saw it. And so I maybe experienced, I'm saying, but I don't remember ever thinking that, like when I go in, I gotta hit this target. So I was just teaching the way I thought I wished I was being taught. That was the whole thing. I wanted to be more active. I wanted to be more people kind of talking and getting excited and doing this and doing that. And so, and I will tell you, I had a few kids early on in my career that you could tell were zoned out. And I would ask the parents just politely, are they taking anything right now? Because they seem like they're focused, and then they're not, and then they kind of shut down. So I'm just trying to think, is it sleep, or what might it be? And they say, oh no, they're on Ritalin or whatever, whatever. And I would say, make sure you talk to your doctor. Again, if you get a chance, just talk to your doctor about that because, I don't want them to zone out and miss too much in here. And it feels like it's zoned out. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying that's what I'm noticing, so delicate dance there, but I wouldn't do that at the beginning of the year, but I would work it in somewhere. And I remember near the end of my career, I never heard any of my boys being on stuff like that, And maybe that was why some people would say, I want Mr. Cecil. And it was usually boys that had issues, in the past. But I loved it because I didn't see it like that. And I never made that equation. I never tied it in. But I think that's exactly what was happening was that I felt you need to make it engaging. You need to get verbs. You need to make it about verbs. Let's get up. You guys have been sitting like 10 minutes. I've been talking. Now it's your turn to talk, or turn and talk to somebody, or get up and move and find somebody, or do this. Good, sit back down. Now let's go another 10 minutes where I can just hit you with some information. Let's stop and do it again. And so everything was in short chunks in a way,
right,
but with movement always built into it. And so I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, I want you to also spend a minute talking about how you had, we'll talk about this, because we talked about how you were accused of
I was getting to
being angry or being,
Oh.
tone it down for these ladies.
So and that was a good, see, when I went in, there was about 10% were males. And so, of the staff. And it was a gym teacher, which was always a male, it seemed to be at that time. And there was a older gentleman that was teaching, and they were always above like a certain grade level. Like you never
right,
saw kindergarten,
right,
it was like fourth and up. And so there's maybe another teacher, that was a male. So it was mostly women, and that was, for me, that worked out great because the women I was placed with were outstanding teachers. And so were the men. But the women, there were so many of them, I couldn't help but notice them. They were around me all the time. And I learned so much from them that I would never have thought of on my own about certain things they were doing and how smooth they made transitions and things like that. But what they told me was that at first, a woman that I was working with, she pulled me aside one time. She said, Bill, you're so good with everybody. You treat everybody really well. But sometimes when you get really excited, it almost comes off like you're trying to push your point, like passion. With that passion, it comes off like it intimidates some of the women because it comes down really strong. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I never would want to do that. And I was horrified. So I learned to tone it down for a while, but I never got rid of it. I just learned how to make sure I don't lose control of what I was doing, and then put that stigma on men that's why you don't have men teachers or this or that. And I also had to do that in my classroom because sometimes I would get upset. It was rare. My kids would always say it's very rare Mr. Cecil gets upset, but when he does, he's mad. And then I had to rethink that and go, I don't want to scare them like that. If I would shut the door really hard and say, guys, that's not acceptable. And it's like, why can't I say that without slamming the door and saying it in a loud voice? So I had to adjust.
Pull back.
I had to pull back. But it was never, but I never thought about like the girls were being ignored either because I was at a time when the girls were in a lot more sports, starting to really get involved in sports. I think the women's soccer team winning the Gold Cup way back when I was.
That's right.
It skyrocketed soccer for young girls. And I love soccer, and we'd go outside and play, and I'd play with the kids. And so sometimes it's the boys who were mostly out there, but now girls were getting out there. And so I noticed as the years were going on, it was more and more a balance of the girls are just as competitive as the boys. The girls like to keep score, so do the boys,
Right.
And so it became just, okay, so now it felt more like we were blending in, and I could just do what I do naturally, which is kind of that team approach of we like to keep score, we like to move, we like to have competition, we like to have something to aim for. And so for me, but I had to learn to make those adjustments early in my career, and I was lucky enough to have somebody brave enough to come and talk to me about that in private and say, don't take this the wrong way. And I said, no, I'll take anything you got. And she was blunt. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm horrified that that's what some people feel, and I will fix that. And I did, and it made a big difference.
And I want to get back, although you said the word competitive, which goes to games, so this brings me back into what we do in the fourth grade. But I also want to push the idea that there are an awful lot of single-parent homes, and most of those single-parent homes are women. Mm-hmm. And so it is really important, I think, to get male teachers in the elementary schools, that are role models. You know, and it is okay also to know that movement is a hugely important part of educating. Keeping kids sitting still deadens nothing. It all stops, right? Move.
And it creates more discipline problems in your classroom, which are distractions to everyone.
Right.
Right.
Right. And yeah, okay. So think about that. And when if you're a guy and you want to go into education, think elementary school a little bit. I mean,
we could use you. We could use some help.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, so I'm going to go back to competing because now more kids compete, and I want to talk about how that is absolutely active learning. I want to hit 4 points before I go on to what I did in the 4th grade. There is agency. It is immediately felt that I am I am learning and I am the agent of my own learning, right? It's not being thrown at me and I'm just supposed to, suck it in and take the learning in and go, and then spit it back out. No, I am actively learning. I am the boss of my experience. Important. The other thing that's absolutely important is that there are rules. There are rules, so I don't have to go, as the teacher, I don't have to make up a new rule or say, you're all being too loud. And I was like, well, that's not one of the rules, right? I mean, I know the rules because the rules are a part of the game.
Yeah.
And so when I was working with the kids, if a kid broke a rule, I would just go, you're out. Sit down. I was the ref. Okay, sit down. I never had to lecture them about, do you understand what you did wrong? I didn't have to stop the whole game and say, now for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about what this kid did wrong.
Yeah.
And so all the other kids are going, yeah, can we please move on? No, I just go, you're out. And then, I give them a couple minutes being out, and I look at them and I say, you know what you did wrong? And they go, yeah, you're gonna do it again? Nope, okay, you're back in. And they want to get back in because it's a game, right?
I love that because and I didn't, it's funny how many things I picked up from you that I think were intuitive then that I started doing. But what parents hate is sometimes you'll have a kid sit out recess for, because they broke a rule. Well, instead of sitting out the whole recess, what about you say, hey, I'm going to take 5 minutes away at recess time. I want you to sit during that time and just think about why I'm having you sit out. It's because you weren't doing what you're working here to earn that playtime. But I'm not taking it all away. But even in those games, in those moments, it's just like in sports. You get a yellow card, you got to change your game right then and there, or you get a red card, you're done. You don't get to come back in. So, but they don't argue about things like that. They don't even think about it. Like, they don't go home and say, I had to sit out 2 minutes in this game because Penny said stop,
Right.
They're just part of the game. So they're like, how do I get back in and stay in the game?
Right.
So because of the competitiveness and the will to want to play, that's what they're doing. They're making adjustments because of those little rules that can keep them out of the game. And that's what teachers, they don't have to make it a big deal.
Right.
Just make it a part of whatever it is.
If it's a game, and you've structured your classroom as a game, then
the boundaries.
It's like there are rules. There are rules in games. It's like boom, out for a few.
Yeah.
Like okay, and I mean, I'd always the only lecture was, do you know what you did wrong? Yeah. Gonna do it again? Nope. Okay,
Get back in the game.
Whatever. That fast.
Yeah.
Because I'm also going to tell you, being an anthropologist, you're supposed to watch, just sit and watch for a while. And I am telling you, the minute a teacher decides they're going to lecture about what kids are doing wrong, and they'll go on and on and on, and the kids just go, oh my God.
I turned off my brain when that would happen.
Please shut up. We get it. Let us go. Okay, so there are rules. The third important part of this is there's a narrative. There's a narrative line, okay? There's a story. And it is the story that gives our life meaning. Right? To talk about this constantly, I'm going to reiterate it. It's like if you have an operation, you don't come out with all of the facts, the data, right? you say, this is what happened, and I met the nicest nurse, and oh my gosh, she saved my life. Okay? The last thing is, there is a dramatic line getting to a climax. So I'm going to do what I did in the 4th grade, and I want to stress, I only did this an hour and a half to 2 hours a week, every single week, right, for the entire school year, right? But they had, in essence, rehearsal time, practice time. So we start out, and there are 3 tribes in one classroom, 3 Native American groups, and those Native American groups, depending on what the curricula was, might be local to the state, because they could be studying state social studies, or it could be in Connecticut, they did all of America in the 4th grade. So I got to spread it through, a New England tribe, a Midwestern tribe, and a Western nation. And then they compete with one another, getting their food, right, making their decisions, and keeping their history. And then, no matter what area, if they didn't get enough social capital or food cards, they spent the next part of the week working on how they can make it better. And you would see them out at recess. I love this. At recess, they'd be going, okay, we've got to figure out how to get our whale, or how to get our buffalo, or how to get our bear. So we're practicing that, the boys. And the girls had the teachers like hide stuff around the playground so they could go actually in real life, because they're outside, find stuff they could gather. So we did that through half the year. Then by the end of the first semester, they had picked a government that was going to be the government that was going to run their classroom for the rest of the year. Then they started competing with other classrooms in the building. Then at the end, it's like the grand championship, because there would be the best nation in that building, and that nation would compete with the other best nations in the other schools. And it was, it was the NBA championship. It was the Super Bowl. So it
I'm was amazing how competitive they do get.
Oh my gosh, yes. And 4th grade. 4th and 5th grade are my favorite grades, absolutely my favorite grades, because they are smart enough to be thinking for themselves and going home and working on things and coming back with plenty of ideas about how they're going to win, and they aren't hormonal yet. Well, most of them aren't hormonal yet. So this is what they are completely locked into, and and they're writing, everything is from the point of view of their experience, right? So it makes history make sense. It makes government make sense. It makes everything they're learning make sense, because it starts with me. And I just can't stress enough how important that...
They're living it.
They are living it in their imaginary what-if world,
right,
that become, and again, with a piece of cloth,
yeah,
because they're heroes, right? They take that piece of cloth, and it's magical when they put it on, and their whole body changes, and they're in this world that they're the bosses of, because we stand back. I'm going to tell, when I get to the 5th grade, I'm going to tell a story about Bill and I, about how little we do. You just let them go. You get it all set up and go, okay, go. And
right,
they're like, okay,
right,
get out of my way.
Takes work to get there, but when they're there, get out of their way.
Yeah. Okay. So we're about to wrap this up. And I'm going to say, we're going back next week to Best Year Ever, and what Bill does in the middle of the year when you hit that mid-year slump. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week. Bye. you.